Did you know your TV was species specific? I didn't know this until very recently. Now, when you bought your Samsung 55-inch QLED whatchamacallit, okay, it didn't say on the box, optimized for higher primates. And the reason for that is that dogs don't yet buy televisions, so there's no need to say that. However, this thing is entirely a mind hack. The whole business of television is 100% a mind hack. Your TV only produces 3 colors. Your brain produces the other million. Okay? So when your TV claims this can produce 1 million colors, it's completely lying. It can only produce 3. Color mixing, just to be clear, is not a physical phenomenon. If you mix red with green photons, you don't get yellow photons. You get red and green photons. The reason your television works is our eyes contain 3 kinds of cone which are variously attuned to 3 parts of the light spectrum. Okay? And by triggering those at varying relative strengths, the television gets your brain to produce every single color on the spectrum and some that don't exist, by the way. Magenta doesn't exist in physics, okay? It's entirely a brain-produced color. And that's because if you fire red and blue at the human brain, okay, the brain goes, well, halfway between red and blue is green, but I can actually detect green, and I'm not detecting anything. So it invents a color. Your top, actually, is absolutely perfect. There's an illustration of that. That's actually your brain's attempt to cope with the absence of green. I mean, if we were like the Terminator, what would happen is you go all fuzzy, and it would say system error, because magenta doesn't actually make sense. It's not a color that exists in reality. The brain basically contrives it so as to make sense of what we're seeing, to make sense of the inputs. Now, if you wanted to be a purist and produce an objective television, that would cost billions and billions of pounds, because the thing would actually have to produce real colors. The other point is, if you wanted to produce a television that worked for every species on the planet, that would cost you, again, billions of pounds. Now, a gorilla would look at your TV and go, that's pretty realistic. They've got pretty similar vision to us, okay? Your dog thinks your television's shit. And that's because dogs only detect 2 colors, and they're different colors to the ones we're sensitized to. That's why if you ever produce dog TV, which you may have done in the pet food industry, okay, TV aimed at dogs, it has a very strange color balance to it indeed. If you show that your television to a pigeon, which have 5 different color receptors, including one that detects ultraviolet light, a pigeon wouldn't understand why you spent €1,000 on this totally washed out picture, okay? Now, my argument is that if we design televisions around human perception, why doesn't the same apply to everything else? Why are we designing things to be objectively accurate rather than subjectively accurate? If you can achieve the thing subjectively rather than objectively at a tiny fraction of the cost, where's the problem? And I think the problem lies simply in that school of economics in which much of business kind of draws its inspiration, which is essentially extremely reductionistic. It wants to reduce everything to small moving parts which are quantifiable and measurable, and then it wants to optimize around that. And Silicon Valley is guilty of this. I call this in Silicon Valley the Dorman Illusion, okay? The Dorman Illusion is where you take something which actually has a complex, evolved function, you define its role very narrowly, you replace it with a piece of technology, and then you declare yourself responsible for all the cost savings, and you walk away, okay? Could also be called the McKinsey illusion, to be absolutely honest, okay? But what you do is, okay, you take a hotel doorman, you go, his function is opening the door, therefore we'll replace him with an automatic door mechanism and we'll save £30,000 a year. What you're not realizing there is that in terms of meaning as distinct from function, the doorman has a whole load of meaning about him which goes beyond, far beyond the narrow function of opening the door. Part of it's recognition. Regular customers of the hotel like to call the doorman Dave and engage in a bit of badinage. He doesn't only open the door, he also hails taxis, liaises with representatives from local organized crime, talks to doormen at other hotels, provides a measure of security, okay? He does, and also provides status to the hotel. If you're going to charge €400 a night, you kind of got to have a doorman, because those are just the rules, right? So you get rid of the doorman, you save £20,000, and what you discover is that 6 months later, the hotel, the rack rate's in free fall, there are vagrants asleep in the doorway, and the whole place has gone to shit. And your regular customers don't want to stay there anymore because they miss Dave, right? And I think that happens all over the place, where you bring in a reductionist mindset from tech or from finance. They define something complicated in a very narrow functionalist way. They replace the function with something else, and then they declare the job done and lay claim to the cost saving. And I think, by the way, it's caused me to be wrong about things. I thought when the bloody Kindle came out, I thought the books were dead. I admit that, okay? I was completely wrong. And that's because that defines the function of a book as text you can read in a portable device. Probably 50% of the function of a book, by the way, is giving it as a present to someone else, sharing it, lending it out, actually furnishing your room. There are lots and lots of other roles for a book which this doesn't satisfy. Interestingly, about 50 to 60% of publishers' sales are in the run-up to Christmas. You can't really give someone an electronic book. In some weird way, this hasn't replaced the magazine. I thought the tablet would. I thought the tablet would replace the color magazine because I thought it was so tactile. What tends to happen when you get a new technology is what the new technology does well is very salient and noticeable to you. And so those things that are noticeable become important. You've read Cialdini's Persuasion, okay? The new things become disproportionately important for a time, and the things the new thing doesn't do so very well become discounted. And over time, what happens is the market finds its own level. So what you've actually seen is that more paper books are now sold than at any time before in history, and the market for electronic books and reading devices has essentially plateaued. And that's because someone with a reductionist mindset was defining something too narrowly. In the same way that if you only define a pill by its functional, medicinal, pharmacological benefits, you're missing part of the value of a pill. Now, just to be clear on this, I think there are two models of advertising, and I think there's the UPS model of advertising, which is it is about getting a message as efficiently as possible to the target audience at as low a cost as possible, okay? And that is part of the role of advertising. I also think there's a costly signaling role to advertising, which is the very fact that it's expensive, difficult, involves talent, skill, humor, wit, craftsmanship, typography, celebrities. Something in scarce supply, okay, means that it's a meaningful message. Okay? You wouldn't have gone to all this effort if you weren't expecting your product to be widely and repeatedly popular. A flower, when you think about it, is basically a weed with a marketing budget. Okay? And flowers advertise, part of the way it works is a bee goes, if you weren't a reliable source of nectar, there's no way you would have invested in all those petals. Because it's costly to invest in petals. They involve a lot of resources, and they also make you attractive to herbivores, because cows can see you from a long way off just as much as bees can. So it's actually a bit of a calculated risk. And my argument is that by focusing exclusively on the digital, efficient, transmission, logistic school of advertising, we're missing half the value that advertising can deliver, okay? It would be highly efficient to invite people to your wedding simply by sending them an email. Don't send off all those thick cards with fancy envelopes, okay? Just send an email saying the parents of so-and-so, request the pleasure of your company, and email it, okay? It's not very impressive. In fact, people would basically suspect there was going to be a cash bar, I think, if you did that, right? Now, on the other hand, the way you do it is you spend a lot of money on card and paper and, extremely expensive engraving and so forth. Or, if you haven't got any money, you use talent and creativity instead, because they're costly as well. So if you had no money and you wanted to produce a great wedding invitation, it would be perfectly okay if you had a modest or better than modest songwriting talent to compose a song inviting people to your wedding, including the address and postcode of the church in a way that rhymed, okay? Sing it, post the video of you singing it to YouTube, and invite people to watch the video. That would be okay, because it's still costly signaling. Merely typing shit into an email and pressing send is meaningless. Because if no effort's invested in it, it's therefore deprived of actual meaning and significance. And we intrinsically derive importance from messages by the effort and cost that goes into their creation and transmission. If bees can do it, it's hardly that surprising that we do. Okay? Hummingbirds do it. They disproportionately go to larger flowers. And that's why, as I said, you do this expensively. A wedding is also proof of long-term commitment because it's upfront expense which you wouldn't engage in if you weren't pretty serious about the relationship. Okay? It's a reliable signal of futurity in intent. Okay, it's terribly unromantic, that. That's what an engagement ring is, basically, okay? It's really depressing stuff like this. Do you know why women particularly like being given flowers and jewelry by men? It's because men aren't remotely interested in flowers and jewelry. So if you've got a bloke in your life who gives you flowers and jewelry, he really, really cares about making you happy because there's no suspicion of self-interest, okay? Whereas if your husband buys you a drone for Christmas or a quad bike, okay, it doesn't quite convey the same sense of self-sacrifice, does it? Okay? Right? Now, I better skip this. I might show it again if we've got time. There's another model of advertising. Actually, no, I will show it later in a second. Another model of advertising I want to discuss is simply that if you're famous, you're more likely to get lucky. Now, the reductionist approach to advertising is you have a specific aim for your advertising in mind. You have a business strategy, a marketing strategy, and then you have an advertising strategy to support the marketing strategy. You design your advertising exclusively to attain the end that you have defined in advance, and you measure the success of your advertising only to the extent which it achieves a predefined, pre-agreed purpose, okay? And my argument is, what if a lot of advertising is just probabilistic? It's just, if you're more famous, lucky shit happens to you more often, right? Okay? If lots of people have heard of you, you will be exposed to more opportunities from which you can choose than if you're obscure. I've got two 18-year-old daughters. That isn't them. I hasten to add. But I've got two 18-year-old daughters, and they're obsessed with going out on Saturday night. I'm 54, right? I just want to stay at home and watch the Discovery Channel. I don't get this at all. But their point is, if you go to a party, they don't have a party strategy, right? They don't have a specific end in mind every time they go to a party. They simply know, okay, if you go to parties a lot, you might get lucky. That could be sexual, romantic. You could get offered a job, part-time job. Maybe you want to get into advertising. You discover someone at a party whose dad works in advertising who can offer you work experience. Maybe you get invited on holiday. Maybe you get invited to a better party the following Saturday. Okay? You don't know how the party's going to pay out in advance. All you do know is that none of that shit's going to happen if you stay at home. Okay? I stay at home watching the Discovery Channel. It's very unlikely that supermodels are going to come round to my door. Okay? If you go out, lots of positive shit, as yet to be determined, might happen. Now, I mentioned this to Keith Weed. I said, I think this is a perfectly reasonable justification for advertising, which is we don't know how it's going to work, but basically if we don't do it, we're going to miss out on a lot of shit we don't know about. Okay? If you're a B2B brand, you do a lot of advertising, you're famous, right? People come and work for you. They work for you for less money because you're famous, okay? When your chief executive rings someone up, they return his calls, okay? None of that happens if you're an obscure B2B brand. Can you quantify it? Can you put a value on it? No. It's almost impossible to quantify. Is it valuable? Yeah, it's really, really valuable. If you're a famous B2B brand, people come to you with business ideas, okay? So I think there's a perfect role for communication, which is just, we don't know how this is going to work. We simply know that the more you do of it, the luckier you get. And even though on occasion it might not work, on the balance of probabilities, this is one of the most effective uses of your money, is simply making yourself known to lots of people. Now, you see, if you're a physicist, if you're a reductionist mindset, that's not science. If you're a statistician, that is science. That's perfectly acceptable. And business thinking, because in most of business, efficiency and effectiveness are the same thing. Okay, most of business is reductionist, not probabilistic. It's deterministic, not probabilistic, okay? And so most of business culture doesn't like probabilistic things. But the simple fact is, as I said, if you advertise something, the expense you put into your advertising has an important bearing on how seriously and how much credibility people put into your product. Because if you had a really, really great product, why aren't you advertising it? Do you not have faith in it? Okay? Now, Here's a perfect example where someone took one of the best products in the world and advertised it really badly and really cheaply. And I always wanted to do this as an experiment, take a brilliant product and deliberately do a bad job marketing it to make the point that actually product itself and marketing, man who cooks the food, man who sweeps the floor, have a multiplicative relationship. It's not an additive relationship, okay? We shouldn't talk about added value because they're actually multipliers. Okay, it's wrong to say, because added value makes it sound like an optional extra. The real value is intrinsic in the product, and all marketing does is add a bit of fairy dust. No, 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 no. If you've got a great product, fantastic product, and you don't market it well, no one wants it. It's worthless in Austrian terms. And this is what, actually, I could never get anybody to agree to this experiment. 2 Melbourne comedians, fantastically, did it for me. So if we can just play that one. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi. Whee! Peep shows. They have a pretty bad name, normally associated with lewd content, but by definition, they don't have to be.
So in an attempt to change that, we took one of the world's biggest performing artists, kept all his clothes on, and set up an Ed Sheeran peep show. Would anyone dare to believe what was written outside and come into our very dodgy-looking venue?
How are you feeling? I don't really know what's going on, to be honest.
That was fair enough, because we dressed Hamish as a fairly shady-looking spruiker in charge of getting customers.
I got you Sheeran. Who wants some Sheeran?
All right, I can hear Hamish.
Do you think we'll get anyone?
I don't think we'll get anyone. It's going to be a brave soul.
I wouldn't come into... If there was a dude with a beard and a hat saying, like, come in and see this.
Ed was right. This was going to be tough.
You want to peep at Ed Sheeran for $2? Insurance? Do you want to peep at Ed Sheeran? Your loss. What do you reckon, big fella? Got Ed Sheeran in here. Beautiful ginger head man. Sitting on a stool. What do you reckon? $2. Got Ed Sheeran just sitting on a stool in there. You want him? $2. $2 for a peep. Think about it. It's actually pretty good value.
Despite trying, we'd had a total lack of interest for over 50 minutes. It's been some time. We should have got you a more comfy chair, I think.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right.
Hey, big fella, I got all the Sheeran you need in there, $2.
What is it?
All the Ed Sheeran you need.
All the what?
Ed Sheeran.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
He's a singer. Yeah? Is that a yes? No? I think one of the big problems is people think Ed Sheeran's a code word for a new drug. How's it going? You guys like Ed Sheeran? $2. $2 for a 30-second peep. No, mate.
What, like, are they just saying no?
Yeah.
Category.
Dirt cheap peep. Dirt cheap peep. Here we go, $2.
Do you reckon we're pricing it too high, and that's why we're not getting people coming in?
I think $2 is pretty fair.
Here we go, boys. It's a Friday. Get you Ed Sheeran peep show. $2. Sitting on a stool, play you a song.
If someone actually does think it's a peep show, and I quickly give you the go-ahead to take off all your clothes, are you willing to do that?
I've been drinking a lot of beer recently.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You're not?
A couple of months ago, maybe, but
Yep.
yeah, I'm in shape. It's just the shape of a potato.
2 hours in, and Hamish was getting more desperate.
Ed Sheeran is literally sitting in there on the stage waiting for your $2.
We were feeling it as well, but just when we thought this had been a giant waste of everyone's time.
You guys like Ed Sheeran?
I love him.
You love Ed Sheeran? $2, peep show. Just got him sitting on stage in there.
Nah, you're lying.
Well, $2.
Are
It's
you
gonna
for real?
cost you $2. You only get 30 seconds though. You wanna come in?
I
Mate.
don't believe you.
Well, there's only one way to find out.
We might be on here.
Here we go. Ed Sheeran peep show. He's there till midday. All right, your choice.
No, she did the smart thing and walked away.
Listen, if you guys want, I'm just saying, if you guys want to have a go, he's sitting in there by himself. It'll probably get busy later on. $2, 30 seconds. I mean, you both can come if you want. Just $2 a head. Everything's above board, I can assure you.
I'm not gonna get
Nah, absolutely not. Like, I can't guarantee what Ed'll do, but yeah, let's pay you $2.
And after 2 hours and 23 minutes, including some final hesitation, we finally found people brave enough to take a peek.
Did you guys go to peep shows a lot, or?
No, it'll be some game of
There you go, man. Keep your clothes on, stay on the seat, behave yourselves.
No,
Just listen to the announcement. Have a good one. Enjoy your peep.
Hello and welcome to the Peep Show. Your time will start in 5 seconds.
I'm actually a bit scared. Oh, it's...
Darling, I will be loving you till we're 17. Baby, my heart could still fall as hard at 23. And I'm thinking about how people fall in love.
Your time is finished. Thank you very much.
Now, the extraordinary thing about that, a few things, okay? One, actually, to get that couple in, he uses 4 behavioral science techniques. It's going to get pretty busy later on. He's only there till midday. He uses scarcity quite strongly. He also says you both can come. It's much easier to get people to do something new if someone they know is doing the same thing. Esther Duflo, by the way, who just won the Nobel Prize for Economics, discovered the same applied to vaccination in the developing world. Have 2 nurses, and if the 2 nurses allow 2 parents, 2 mothers to come along with 2 children simultaneously, the likelihood people feel happy vaccinating their children goes up massively. If you ask them to go one at a time on their own, the nervousness takes over, okay? I love the economist in the room going, do you think we're pricing it too high? The other interesting thing, okay, if you'd taken a half-page ad in the Melbourne newspapers the weekend before, I think it's called The Age, okay? You could have charged $200 for that and people would have been queuing around the block, okay? If you don't advertise it convincingly enough, right, it doesn't matter how good your product is. Okay? If something doesn't feel right, no one will buy it, however good your product is rationally and on paper. If the feeling around buying it doesn't feel good, if there's some cognitive dissonance, anyone from Nestle here? They did the thing where they sold 2 versions of the Virtuo Nespresso machine, the Virtuo and the Virtuo Plus, with an automatic opening mechanism, and they were both the same price. And I had to ring up Nestle and say, you won't sell any, because we can't make sense. I said, just charge $5 more for the Virtuo Plus. Then it's fine, it'll walk off the shelves. I said, if you make them the same price, people can't get their head around the basic and the prestige version of a product being the same price. Once something feels wrong like that, you're not going to buy anything. Okay? If you have 2 products and one of them's better than the other and also cheaper than the other, now an economist would say that's the easiest decision in the world, higher utility, lower cost. In reality, consumers get confused because they go, well, second order thinking, if I had a better product, I'd charge more for it. So the fact that this product is actually cheaper probably means it's a bit shit. Extreme cases, Ulay Active Hydrating Moisturizing Cream, not an area of specialism myself, as you can see. £5, nobody bought it. £15, it walked off the shelves. Okay? You can price yourself so you're in just the wrong category, so nobody wants you. And so I often describe, very simply, I said, marketing's really easy. Psychology, it's just the science of knowing what economists are wrong about. Okay? If you want to do some innovative work in this, go, okay, what would an economist assume was true in this case, and what are they wrong about? And quite likely, you'll discover that someone in your business decision-making process, in designing the product, pricing the product, promoting the product, has thought like an economist. Now, imagine for a second, okay, you're a bunch of rational economists, you're sitting in a room, you want to compete with Coca-Cola. And for 100 years, it's been the most popular cold, non-alcoholic drink in the world, apart from water. And you go, well, we obviously need a drink that tastes nicer than Coke, it's got to cost less than Coke, and it should come in a really big can so people get great value for money. Now, nobody will get fired for doing that, will they? Because it's completely rational. There's only one problem. The most successful attempt to compete with Coke in 50 years is that. It costs a fortune, it comes in a tiny can, and it tastes disgusting. Okay? Why does it work? Back to the placebo. All the things that make it a terrible drink make it a brilliant drug. Tastes weird. Drugs have to taste weird, right? Health food has to taste a bit shit, okay? Because otherwise we don't believe in it. Diet Coke is deliberately made more bitter than regular Coke. They don't have to make it more bitter. That's what Coke Zero is. It's the same taste as Coke. Diet Coke has to be made more bitter because otherwise we won't believe it's a diet drink. Okay? In the same way, if you claim something has psychological or psychotropic effects, it's got to taste a bit weird. The fact that it's expensive makes it even more potent, and the fact that it comes in a tiny can says, this is really powerful stuff. We can't give you a full 370 milliliters, or you'd probably go crazy and shoot someone. Okay? Then even better, it was banned for under 16s. You couldn't ask for a better gift than that, could you? I mean, you really couldn't. Okay? Now, when I said it tastes weird, they researched it with a soft drinks company who said, this is the worst drink we've ever researched in the history of our company. Normally people say it's too sweet, it's not my thing. Here they said things like, I wouldn't drink this piss if you paid me to. But it's a terrible drink. As a comparison with Fanta, if you're expecting Fanta, it's awful. If you want to believe something has a pharmacological effect or a psychotropic effect, everything that makes it a bad drink makes it a brilliant product. Loads and loads of things, if you think about it. If Dyson, I'll admit this, if James Dyson had come to me about 15 years ago and said, I think there's a market for £500 vacuum cleaners, I would have said, James, don't give up the fucking day job. Because at first glance, this is an insane assumption, okay? If anything is a distress purchase, it's a bloody vacuum cleaner. The only reason you buy one, you get no joy from it, okay? It doesn't make a good present for your wife, I think it's fair to say, right? Okay? You get no pleasure out of it. The only reason you buy one is because your old one breaks or you move out of rented accommodation and you finally have to buy one of your own. That and the £500 hair dryer, you can only explain that using psychology. Besides, you'd think anybody with a £500 to spend on a vacuum cleaner probably employs a cleaner, so they don't even vacuum their own flat anyway, okay? The objections to this product from a rational standpoint are absolutely immense. And then there's this. You can sell a non-alcoholic spirit drink for the same price you sell a bottle of gin, despite the fact there's no tax on the stuff at all. These people are minting it, okay? Nespresso, one of the most brilliant psychological products in the history of the world. Why? Because if you sold it in a jar, nobody would buy it. If you researched people and said, would you pay £40 for a jar of coffee? No, it's fucking ridiculous, okay? Right? It's crazy. But the interesting thing is, we don't know what an individual Nescafe costs. We don't know what an individual filter coffee costs, because we're not that sad, okay? Unless you work in procurement or something, okay? Right? So when you put that 40-cent capsule in your Nespresso machine, your frame of reference isn't Nescafe, it's Starbucks, or it's the cafe at the end of the road, okay? I did say to Ogilvy in Rome, I said, this is my favorite city in the whole world, I said to my colleagues in Ogilvy, Rome. I said, but doesn't it piss you off that you have to pay €5 every time you want a coffee? And they burst out laughing and said, if you're Italian, they do not charge you €5. So I worked that one out, okay? Right? But when you think about Nespresso, okay, it's brilliant because instead of thinking, if I had to buy it in a jar, I would regard it as insane. For an equivalent amount of caffeine, a jar of Nespresso would cost about €40, okay? But because I compare it to a cafe coffee, every time I put the 40-cent pod in my machine, I go, wow, this machine's basically making me money. Because I'm comparing it to the £2.40 I'd pay in a coffee shop. I told Unilever to do the same thing with tea. I said, why don't you do the tea equivalent of Nespresso? They said, we tried it, it didn't work. I said, where did you try it? France. Okay. Now, I don't know if you know anything about France, but they haven't made a decent cup of tea since the Germans left, basically. Okay. So the likelihood that a premium tea-making machine is going to succeed in France is pretty damn remote. Okay. But anyway,